Hello and welcome to Graphics, Gears, and Wires. This is Henry, and I'm going to get into a tutorial on the Lander game that I started to show in another episode. What we're going to look at today is building a UI for it. So we won't actually be looking at the Lander or the Lander surface or any of the actual gameplay today. We're going to look at the UI specifically. This is just a quick and dirty UI I put together that can be used for lots of these kind of retro games and can be really easily embedded into a web page if you want to make like a web arcade or something like that. So it's going to be very generic, but we'll be able to customize it if we make, say, another game. Another game I plan to make in the tutorial would be like Asteroids, that kind of thing, or we'd be able to make different graphics and put them on top of this same UI and reuse it. Reusability is important when you're going to be an indie developer because you're writing all your own code and you're building your own scenes in Godot, so you definitely want to build stuff that you can use again. So let's get into it. I'm just going to go ahead and run it. And let me move this to the game window. So here's basic screen. This background image can be an image of anything, so we can design artwork for whatever game we're making with our UI in Illustrator or CorelDRAW or something, and just apply it right to the background. These buttons all generic, so credits, we can write whatever we want in here. Go back to the main menu. You can see everything just works, changing scenes, and I'm able to start the game, which loads a UI, which would basically be the hull and the fuel of the lander. But it would load the UI and let you play the game. Then we'll hit escape or the P key, and that brings up our pause menu. It gives us the option to continue play or to go back to the main menu, where we can start again, go to the credits, or quit. So it's a functioning UI that does everything that the basic menu needs to do. Starts the game, lets you do some credits, lets you quit the game, displays a pause menu. So let's look at some of the code. Now, I'm not going to be one of those guys that just copy pastes line for line the code as it's obviously already been written so that I can show this stuff. I'm just going to walk through it and discuss some of it and talk about why I'm making some of the decisions that I am. So I'm going to go over here. This is the hopefully familiar Godot interface, and you can see I've got a single control object called UI, and I've renamed this. All of these things I rename myself so that I can keep track of them. Each one of these is a panel, and I'm able to look at each of these panels and design my UI a page at a time. And each of these, we'll look at the main menu. Each of these has child objects, which can easily be edited. So as we go into building other games and reusing our UI, it's very simple to just change this to something like Asteroids. If I could spell. Wow. It's still not right. So yeah, you could make it say anything you want, and it's very easily just customize your UI and reuse it. The thing that makes that reusability really possible is Godot's the way it handles scenes. So everything you build in Godot, they recommend should be a scene that'll run on its own. It shouldn't be really dependent on too much except its own children. So here you can see I've got a single script, and there's no scripts attached to any of these pages. And this single script handles only UI stuff. It's not calling to the game. It's not trying to look up the fuel of the lander. It's not trying to look up the hull. It's not trying to report or check the, it's not trying to look up the level or something like that. All it's doing is being a user interface, a game menu. The next level up, the next node, its parents node, the game node, that's going to be where we're going to write all the code that says the UI is in this state, so I can do, X function. We're going to put all the control in the game node itself, and that would be something like this, where we have the game, and nested inside it the UI. And the game itself, right now, it doesn't have any code in here. But as we add the lander and add the surface, I'll be pasting in the code that moves those things around. What I'm trying to demonstrate here is that I've got things separated and planned in such a way that each element of my game is an individual piece that can be edited and run by itself, or thrown into a new scene and used as a child of that scene, without needing to be dependent on 100 other things in the game that I'm building today. That can come in a lot of handy as an indie developer. So let's take, actually, as anyone, reusing code, whether you're working load or not, is important. So let's get back to that code I was going to show you. This is the UI code, and I basically have one main function. It's just the UI state, and it takes a variable, which is a string, which is the state. Actually, it's not a string; it's an enum, and I'll show you that. Here we have enum UI states. And enums are great because they let you give easy to understand names to variables. You could easily do something like this. Variable UI states equals 0. And then you could just remember, you know what, 0, and actually this is GD script, 0 equals main, 1 equals play. That's tedious, and you've got a lot of things to remember that way. And enum takes care of all of that. It might be enum. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. But it takes care of all that. It makes it very easy. You'll see that as we step through this UI state function. We also have a variable here, which is just a state. And I'm going to move that up with my other variables. There we are. Okay. So the state can contain a value from this enum UI states. So the first thing we do is assign a state so that we just have a general what's the state of the UI. I'm just saving it there. And here when we change UI state by feeding it a new state here and running this function, I initialize each part of the UI. Everything gets turned off. So I don't have something showing that I don't need. And then I check the value of this state using a match statement, which in GDScript is a lot like a switch statement. And like a switch statement in PHP or something. So we would use this state variable, and we're going to use the match statement, and it says UI states main. This is basically the case. If you're used to Python, this would be a case. So here, UI states.main, then turn on the only menu we need. So for every single UI state possibility, it turns on the correct menu. All the other menus are already off, so you don't have to worry about writing code over and over to turn off the pause menu and the game over menu every time you turn on the main menu. That's handled up front in the function. By the time the code reaches the end of the function, all those things are done for you. So let's look at specifically, let's look at the next function, the ready function. This runs as soon as you start the game, as soon as the UI is loaded. So what we do here is I save these children, these getNode functions. I save the results of those into variables that just have easier names to work with. I'm not sure that it's faster in Godot for the engine to look up the value of variable pause menu versus run the function getNode pause. That'd be interesting if someone wants to let me know. But I find it easier to work in the code if I save these values to a variable and then work with them later. So besides the ready function and the UI state function and this small set of variables and a single enum, we have the process function. And what I'm doing here is I am just checking to see during gameplay if anybody has pressed the pause key. So you see here, input is action just pressed, UI paused, and then I send a new state to the UI state function. How do we get this value? This is just pressed. So in Godot, you can assign keys by going up to project settings and input map. And here you'll have a bunch of stuff already pre-populated. This stuff is cool if you're going to distribute your game. A lot of it is written for you. Sometimes I'll delete it and start from scratch. That may or may not be a good idea. I have basically just added a function here because it didn't exist, UI pause, and I assigned the P key. Basically go up here, type in UI pause, and then click add. Down here, when you want to add a key to it, you can just hit this plus icon, and you can see you can add joysticks, axes, mouse buttons, or keys, and you can have multiples. Here I've got the P key assigned and also escape. So in the middle of gameplay, if you hit escape, your pause menu comes up. If you hit P, your pause menu comes up. So that's easy to do in Godot. Godot handles a lot of the hard stuff to do. If you're an indie developer and you play with making your own engine for fun, I've done this. Godot is fantastic. Start with Godot and build from there, because things like this are handled. So let's close this and step through the last part of the script, and that is all of these on button start up, on button credits button up, all of these functions. And what are these and how do they get made? Because we don't write all this stuff. This is a bit of boilerplate code and that code to set up the function, and then I give it its statements for that function. So what do? Let's look at the UI, and I'm going to show you one more quick thing before we change. Right now I'm in script view. In the Godot editor, you can easily go back to the 2D view and the script view, and you can change the view you're looking at real easy using these buttons. So we want to look at a visual representation rather than the code, so I'm going to change to the 2D screen. And we're looking at the main menu, so let's look at the quit button. The quit button has a function attached. You can tell because it's got this little icon here. It's got one connection. And we're going to go over here to node. And under node, you can see I've got a couple of functions. I assign these to button up because in a UI for me, I might click a button and then unclick the button, and I might scroll off sometimes and want to unclick like I didn't click it. So I use button up instead of button pressed. There may be a good or bad reason to or not to do that, but that's the reason that I use button up for my UI. So to add a function, all you do is select the event that you want to connect the function to, and in Godot they call them signals. And we're going to click connect, and you'll just choose the root of your node. You've got all these small parts here, all these children. Just choose the root where the script is and hit connect. When you do that, it's going to create these boilerplate functions for you, and all you have to do is write what happens when that button's pressed. I find it best to keep these very short because you don't want to do a whole bunch of processing and things when you're just clicking a button. You want something to just happen fast and get out of the way. It's kind of an event. It's not really something that should be running in a loop, right? You would never want to put a loop into something like this, most likely. So here is, that is the entirety of the code that I've done for that UI, and I'm going to turn on the UI one more time just to demonstrate how it works. But there's really not there. It's 77 lines of code, including spaces, and a lot of that is boilerplate. So let's run the game one more time. You can see we've got our credits. This we can change from the game node, the parent node. We'll have access to these screens, so we'd even be able to update this information from the game once the game's playing. In fact, the start menu, the game itself will work that way. The main node, the parent node, which we're going to call the game node, will send the value of the hull and the value of the fuel to these two user interface elements, and the value or the position of the status of the lander, I should say. If it lands or crashes, will change values, which will be detected by the parent node, the game node, and those changes will be reflected in the UI. So you see how in the end everything's kind of controlled by that single game node, that game script, and then we'll have a couple of children that handle their own stuff and can run without that parent, but when they are there for that parent takes their values and is able to manipulate the other children in the scene to get your game to run. So I'm going to hit pause, I'm going to go back to main and quit the UI, and that is going to be the end of this video. I will get this up on GitHub so that you guys can take a look at it, but I'm going to work through a bit of the tutorial first. The next thing I'm going to show you is the actual lander and surface code, and those two elements are really all there is left to the game. How to move the lander around, how to do a particle effect, that kind of stuff, how to do collisions. Not a very long tutorial. Godot makes that very easy. And we'll also deal with how to procedurally change the landscape of the surface that you're landing on, so that every level is always the same when you play, but you don't have to manually build those levels. We'll build one object that can procedurally change based on a seed we give it, and then give us infinite levels from there. So I'm going to be ready to get into that tutorial in the next couple of days. If anybody has any questions, comments, please leave them in the comments below. Please like, subscribe, and share this video. If you're enjoying my content, I appreciate it. Let me know. I'm getting some great feedback from some people, and I really do appreciate that. It makes a big difference. It's a new channel, and I'm trying to get a feel for what people want to see and hear. So definitely let me know what I can do to make this better and more useful for you as we start doing these actual tutorials of some of the projects that I've been showing. Thanks a lot.